Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Roland Rock Podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Mcvey, and I'm here with my co-host, Roland Robinson.
Hey, everybody.
And this week, we're joined again by Rene. How you doing, Rene?
I'm doing good. How's everyone doing?
We're doing pretty good.
Doing good.
So we're back with another themed episode, as always. And this week, we're going to be talking about something all three of us do a lot of, and that's collecting. And this is not about anything specific. It's just collecting in general. And what we each all have our own collections, and that's how we're going to get started here. So since Renee's the guest, we'll throw it to him first and get started to tell us a little bit about what he collects personally.
So I do a mixture of collecting, mainly action figures. I used to do a lot of like Ninja Turtles and Power Rangers and wrestling figures. In the last couple of years, I've kind of narrowed it down to mainly wrestling. Still do a few other stuff like Harry Potter, Lego. But I'd say the majority of stuff I do now is wrestling figures.
And you have a pretty good collection of wrestling figures. So what I've seen, I didn't even know there was as many as there is. I guess I could say I semi-collected them at one time, but they were a lot different back in those days.
Yeah. I'd say ever since Mattel took over, they've done a really amazing job with the figures. I mean, it used to be where, like, if you bought a Big Show and a Rey Mysterio, the figures would be the exact same size. Now they actually make an effort of, like, hey, if you buy a Andre the Giant or a Big Show, that they're actually going to be big versus a Rey Mysterio action figure. So it's definitely, they've really done a good job, and the details and all that, and to the figures and everything, it has been really good. Like Mattel has done an amazing job.
What about you, Ron? What's your collections these days?
Well, it would be easier for me to tell you what I do now versus what I have collected over the course of my life. Of course, we all started out with action figures. And Rocky, you've known me the longest, so you know I've collected at one point in time a little bit of everything. I did, unfortunately, will say this. I used to collect comic books. And before I moved to my current location, I did actually sell my entire collection out. So that was a sad day. But right now, the things that I collect are pretty much anything involving Warhammer 40K. As far as I collect a lot of I wouldn't even really call it collecting, but I buy a lot of the figures that I like because I get a lot of enjoyment out of painting them. I also collect little oddities. A company named Sideshow Collectibles made some statues for 40K back in the early 2000s. And for whatever reason, I got in a weird thing that I wanted to collect those. So I've been slowly putting those together. But yet again, something to do with 40K. I also collect, I wouldn't say collect, but I do piece together a lot of their old art books and things like that. Obviously, 40K. And then now I'm actually getting back into Magic the Gathering, or Crack the Addiction, as we lovingly call it. A friend of mine who we had just done the video with, Joe, the unboxing video of Silver Tower. Joe, for those of you who don't know, actually used to be my roommate. He was also one of our old co-hosts, but me and Joe actually were really into Magic. And what broke me finally of that was I had to sell off the entire collection I had to pay taxes one year. So that kind of broke me from, because I had a lot, and I had a lot of expensive stuff that I had to let go. But now I'm starting to piece all that back together. So there's another thing I'm collecting. So short answer, Magic the Gathering right now, and Warhammer 40K memorabilia.
Well, like you guys, I have collected a lot of things over the years. I think I started out with comic books was my original collection. Then, I mean, if you're going to collect comic books, then you got to collect action figures. So I moved into that, and then video games and God, I don't even know what all I have collected over the years. And I also had a huge collection of anime at one point in time, like trunks full of anime.
Back before it was readily available.
Yeah, when I had to search far and wide to find what I was looking for. But I sold all that off years ago now, after I got married, to pay off bills and, do things that you got to do once you become an adult. The good thing is that collections, if you take care of them, can be worth quite a bit of money, so you can pay them off. you can sell them off after years and get quite a bit of cash out of it. But I still collect, but now I've narrowed my collection down because there's only one thing that I really love, and that's video games. And but when I started collecting video games, that is a huge collection too. And I just couldn't do it. I was like, I'm never going to be able to have my collection the way I want it if I collect all video games, because I'm kind of a completionist, and you're definitely not going to be able to complete, or at least not with my budget anyways. I'm never going to be complete an NES collection. I can't afford $10,000-$15,000 for one game. So right now I collect two. I've narrowed it down that I have two collections that I have, and one is the original Xbox and the Atari 2600. And I'm just going to keep collecting those until I have a complete collection of both. And whenever I do finally complete them, I may add a third into it. But as of right now, that's the only two that's on my list, and that's the only two that I buy. So I think that's a pretty good way to narrow it down to.
Two things with what was said. One, I never collected comics like you guys. Never, I've been into superheroes stuff all my life, but most of my superhero stuff has been through the cartoons or the movies, or whenever I needed to fill in the gaps, just go to Wiki or whatever and read up on stuff. But I never really collected comic books. Second thing is, anime was very expensive to collect back in the day. One of the first animes I got into was Ranma 1/2. I don't know if you guys remember that one.
Yeah, I remember it.
And I mean, back then it was 2 episodes per VHS tape.
And they were $30 for a
VHS tape. Yeah.
And then there's 170 episodes or something like that. So I remember one year I watched it because of a good friend, and then one year I walked into a FYE or something like that, and they had the whole seasons on DVDs. But at the time, a whole season was maybe $100 or more, and I ended up getting it through DVD and all that. And now you can pretty much stream it on Hulu.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to say, of all of my collections that I got rid of, my anime is probably the one that I miss most, just because a lot of that stuff, like, you can stream now, but there's a lot of that stuff that just completely disappeared, and finding it now is almost impossible. I mean, there's a lot of those like 70s and 80s animes that just don't exist anywhere anymore. They were like, so much anime was made that they just like completely forgot about some. Basically, they were like, they didn't sell well, so it didn't do well when it was on TV, so it just disappeared. And now there's stuff that you just can't find anymore.
No,
I never thought about that, but that's a shocking thing.
I know it's off topic, but what was your favorite anime?
Well, if we're talking movie, if we just want to talk movie, my favorite anime movie of all time is Vampire Hunter D, the original. If we're talking TV show, I would say it's between the original Dragon Ball, the original series when he was a kid, and probably Hunter x Hunter. And I'll say the remake of that one because it's actually better than the original Hunter x Hunter from the 90s. But those will be my two favorite TV shows.
Okay. I already mentioned Ranma 1/2, and I like the original Dragon Ball too. I couldn't get into Dragon Ball Z, and I know that's probably blasphemy for some people, but I never got into it. And movies, I think like the first anime movie I remember watching was Ninja Scroll. And I think that was the first time I had ever seen that type of gore and all that in a cartoon. So I was maybe 11 the first time I watched it, but I remember liking it a lot. It's been years since I watched it, but I remember liking it a lot.
Yeah, I was probably maybe 9 or so the first time I watched Vampire Hunter D. And that is definitely not a kid's anime.
Oh no. That was I remember watching that Ninja Scroll, and I was just like, wow. Because you grow up watching like Voltron or things like that, and then when you see that, it's like all bets are off.
Yeah.
And that was a great movie too.
Yeah, you're watching it and it's like, that's not Sailor Moon.
I have to say, I think probably one of my favorite anime TV shows was Trigun or Cowboy Bebop, along with
I love Cowboy Bebop too.
And Fully Cooley, I could sit down and watch the first season. I have not really been able to watch the newer ones.
I will say I really like Trigun too, but Trigun is only good for like the first half of the series, and then it goes way downhill the last half.
Well,
I like the whole thing.
The biggest issue there. The biggest issue with anime is that eventually the anime surpasses the manga, so then they pretty much have to start making shit up, and then it kind of deviates too much because that eventually happened with Ranma and Inuyasha and all that stuff. And once they start to deviate from the manga, it's not as good. So like that's one series I always wish that they would go back and finish it the way the manga finished it. But we already got off topic.
Right.
Yeah, we've got way off topic now. Let's get back to our topic. So, collecting, and we said that this will be collecting. I said collecting at the original, but really this is like the downside of collecting, because there is a lot of downsides when you start having collections, and that's what we're going to talk about here. So, we're going to jump into like one of the biggest topics on the downsides, and that's costs. And I don't know about you guys, but the cost of collecting at one time was okay. I really didn't have to. I mean, like we were talking about the anime thing, like $30 for one VHS with 2 episodes. That sucks. But it got like to where collecting wasn't too bad for a little while. The cost of stuff wasn't that bad. But then eBay started to exist. And as soon as eBay came on the scene, it was like, what the fuck? Now the whole yard sale mentality that you had at one time is out the window, and stuff is like the prices started skyrocketing. And if we want to talk about cost, I think you probably have it the worst of all, Roland, because oh my God, Magic the Gathering is insane. If you try to collect it.
It is, especially, if I had a nickel for every time I've thought, if I could just go back to when I was in high school and tell myself, hey, this really cool game that you like, don't open everything. Just hold on to it. Don't have to open every booster pack. Because, for example, one of those booster packs of cards, I think it was like $2, or it was under $5 back in the day. I looked up the price of one of them, still sealed today, is over $500 for just one booster pack. That's it. If I was to purchase a sealed box, you're looking at enough money, like if you get into alpha, beta, and unlimited. And for those of you that don't know, which I think most of our listeners will probably know, your first set of Magic came out in different sets. The first set was obviously alpha, very low print run. Second was beta, even a shorter print run. And the third one was unlimited. And then I think it was like 93, 94, you got into revised, which is when I started. But in those areas, if you have any of those sealed boxes, you were looking at enough money to almost make a substantial down payment on a nice house with just one box. As far as like how much they're worth. Now, how much you will actually get out of them, that's another thing kind of in collecting. And it's kind of one of the downsides with cost. Oftentimes, and it's something I've had to learn, that number is almost arbitrary. How much something is worth is arbitrary to how much someone is actually willing to pay for it. Like some of my Magic cards, for example, I got stuck in a really bad position in which I had to pay taxes. And I had to get money quick. My collection was worth a good amount of money. I let my collection go for about $2,000. It hurt my very soul to let a lot of that go for that cheap price. But you know who doesn't care about your soul and who doesn't care about your feelings? The government. So when the government wants their money, you're going to have to pay them their money. Now, that being said, as soon as I got done selling my collection more than quadrupled in price 2 weeks later. That was the icing on the cake for me selling that collection. And then as far as pricing goes, for my other collections, Warhammer is not a cheap hobby. That is a game that engineers and college graduates play because it sometimes, if you're not careful, can cost as much. I don't think it is as much as Magic the Gathering, but it is still not the cheapest of hobbies. And I will say with the statues that I started collecting for Warhammer, surprisingly, and I don't know what's caused that, but surprisingly, the price on those has actually gone up as well.
I was going to mention one of my hobbies that pricing is kind of crazy too is Lego. You know, just that retail alone, you know, your average set is probably $100. And some of the bigger sets, I think their biggest set ever is like $700. It's this huge Millennium Falcon. But like you were saying, like when it comes to collecting, like you know, sometimes you're not able to buy something when it releases, and you let it go by. You know, by the time you go to eBay and those sets aren't available at retail anymore, like they, you know, double or triple in price. You know, sets that would normally go for 200 now they want 400 or 500 once you go online for stuff, and it just gets ridiculous.
The biggest thing is with the eBay thing is like scalpers. Okay, so like right now, if anybody's listening to the future, we're still in the middle of the pandemic, and like one of the things that's super hot right now is Nintendo Switch. It's $300 retail, but because we're in this pandemic, everybody's buying them up like crazy, and you can't find one. No stores have them; they're just sold out everywhere. And every time a store gets them in, scalpers go buy the whole inventory, and then now they sell them for like $400 or $500 on eBay and places. And that happens with a lot of stuff that's collectible. Like scalpers will just, if they see that it's worth something, they'll buy it up and then they just throw it up on eBay or Craigslist or wherever and run the price way up there.
Well, I mean, you got to make up for all the toilet paper you bought. So you got to make that price up.
But I mean, you either have to pay it or you just don't get it. And it's just I love eBay in some ways because it makes finding your collection easier, but it's destroyed the pricing on stuff. And as Roland said, it's only what people's willing to pay. And you know, like what I'm willing to pay isn't what some other person's willing to pay. And like, let me put it this way: if I got one, I think I got it right here. I do. So this right here, this is one of my favorite games from when I was a kid, Operation Wolf. It's on NES. This is in by no way a rare game. There was tons of these made. You can find these everywhere. But to find this in the box and not like this has been opened, to find this in the box, you're talking like $50. There's no way it should be worth this. It's like they're a dime a dozen, but you will not find anybody selling it for less than that, even though it's just some common off-the-shelf game just because it has a box. And I think that's insane because that should be like a $10 game or something. There's nothing rare about it. It can be found anywhere, but still people just throw the price up. And NES is the worst in my collecting world. Like there are games that go for upwards of $20,000. They should not ever be worth that.
Yeah, I have a friend. He runs his collectible store, and I'll definitely give him a shout out. It's called Toy Headquarters here in Lexington, and what he's done with his inventory is really amazing. He'll check prices on eBay and then mark down the prices about 10 or 15% below what the average is, and then sells it at that price in his store or on his eBay store. And he just, because he sets the price by $5, $10, $15 less, he makes so much more money. He was actually just his store was actually just on Zack Ryder and Kurt Hawkins' podcasts or their video casts, where they came and like walked around his store for like 45 minutes. But if anyone's local in the area, I definitely recommend going to go check him out if you're into collectibles and stuff like that, just because he's one of the good guys that does his pricing right and makes sure, you know, that the consumer isn't getting screwed consistently there. And his store opens back up on June 5th if you guys, if anyone's interested in checking it out.
One of the things that, and like you were saying, I think the internet has ruined a lot of the old school collecting. I remember like vendors malls, in my opinion, are the absolute worst for it too. Used to, you could find if you went through it, you sometimes could find a gem, but now everybody's got the internet, you know, right here in the palm of their hand. So since they have the internet there, they feel that they're automatically an expert and they know exactly what this is worth and what they should get out of it. Well, like I said earlier, you're going to get out of it what somebody's willing to give for it. One of my favorite memories is finding an old copy. Actually, you were with me when I found this copy, Rocky. This was back in early, I'd say 2000, may have been 99. An old peddler's mall in London had a copy of Mega Man 7 for $19, the old SNES cartridge, and I bought that. And I had that cartridge all the way up until 2014 or 2015, and I sold it for $150 because that was the buy price for it. I had no clue that game was even that rare. But it's gone are the days of going to a flea market or going to a yard sale and usually chasing that high, finding that cool thing. Mainly.
Yeah, I still enjoy going on the hunt for stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
Like occasionally, if I have a day, you know, if I have a completely free day, I'll go hit up 6 or 7 stores for a figure hunt, you know, and see what I could find. I really miss, you know, Toys R Us being around too, and that was always a fun place to hit up every once in a while too.
R.I.P. Jeffrey, we remember.
Yeah.
You know, it's coming back, actually.
It is.
Is it? I haven't heard.
They're bringing it back. The CEO of the company, or the last CEO of the company, I guess he bought like all the rights to the actual store, and he's got investors, and he's going to bring it back as they said they're starting off small, though. It's not only going to be like certain locations. So,
yeah, the Toys R Us that was here in Lexington, it's been gone for about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years. It's finally being turned into a Burlington coat factory.
Sad days.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of the things that, like, a lot of old Warhammer product is not really all that expensive to buy unless you get into the super rare stuff and or sealed product. That's where you kind of get with like Warhammer. That's where you kind of get locked in a hard spot. Some of their older sealed product is sealed and it's like 10 plus years old. It's, if you wanted to buy it, you're going to have to pay for it. But Games Workshop actually does a really good job at keeping a lot of that stuff still available nowadays. I got to say, I really like how that company has changed its ways from the earlier years. But most of their shops are really small boutiques, and they rely mostly on those or online shopping. So you don't really have a storefront for either of those. And Magic, it's everywhere. It's in all your local game stores. It's in Walmart, Target, just about anywhere you go. You can't throw a rock without finding a booster pack for Magic.
Well, speaking of that's like that kind of goes into what our next topic, Pitfall, which is exclusivity, and different stores having exclusives. Well, I will say, in what I collect, what I'm collecting now, where I went down to just the 2 collections, it's not as bad. But in video games, exclusivity just straight up sucks because every store has its own exclusive version of a game now. And not only, honestly, not only is it bad for collecting, it's also bad if you're just a gamer in general, because if you want like the entire game, you have to buy like 5 copies from 5 different stores to get all the stuff until they release like an Ultimate Edition somewhere down the line. And exclusivity, I don't understand why. I guess, well, maybe I can understand a company throwing money at, a developer or whatever to try to get it, but it's just bad. It's just bad for the fans, in my opinion. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I think exclusivity is one of the worst things that's happened to the market when it comes to collecting.
I agree. With wrestling figures, like Target has exclusives, Walmart has exclusives, GameStop does one, and then one of the biggest wrestling figure sites, Ringside Collectibles, they have exclusives as well. And the problem is that some people will go and buy them, and then because they're only found in certain stores, then they put them online for these crazy prices because that's the only store you can find it at. And if that store happens to not exist in your area, it just makes it even more difficult and stuff like that. But that gets really annoying too.
I got to say, that reminds me, there is an exclusivity thing right now with one of Games Workshop's products, and to say that it's exclusive in the fact that it's going to be a limited release and you can only get it certain places, yes, but it's not because anyone approached Games Workshop and gave them money. It's because Games Workshop decided to say, during this global pandemic, we're going to make this figure and we're going to release it to local game stores. We're doing a limited run of them. That way, the local game store that sells this figure gets to retain 100% of the profit. It literally costs the game store absolutely nothing to get it. So it allows the game stores to actually have 100% profit on that said item. That being said, there's a lot of game stores in the entire world, so that drives the availability of this figure down to a scarcity, which automatically increases the availability, or it decreases the availability of it, thus increasing the scarcity. So on the secondary market, I've seen this figure go for almost $100 just for one little plastic model. And it sucks because I really liked the model. It was literally a 40K version of Carl Weathers from Predator. But anyways, I've also dealt with exclusivity from Target.
Does the arm come off on the figure?
No, but
that's a shame.
It is, but there is predator blood on one of the plants. What was I saying? Oh yeah, I used to play in a collectible game called HeroClix for years, and WizKids and Target had an exclusivity on a lot of some of their sets, especially some of their later movie sets that were coming out. The only way to get them was Target. Now, when I lived in London, that sucked because the nearest Target was almost 2 hours away, which was in Lexington. So if I wanted to drive to Lexington to try to hopefully find one of these, yeah. If not, then hey, guess what? I burned all the gas and pretty much a good chunk of the day getting there and back for nothing. So yes, I can safely say that sucked, because if I tried to buy it on eBay or go online and be like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to try to get it through the secondary market. The secondary market is going to just rake you over the coals, especially if it's something new and it is catching on, like a lot of those, like the Avengers movie set HeroClix and stuff like that were.
Yeah, a little bit off topic, on topic. Rocky, you were talking about video games, like different versions, but DLC, like you basically pay $60 and then they want you to pay another $50 in DLC to get a complete game. That's something I really hate about video games nowadays, man. Like, you know what? If you want to charge me $60 for a game, give me a complete game. If you want to charge me $50 for DLC, then guess what? Go ahead and put the $110 price tag on the game, if that's what you're gonna do. Because I'd rather pay it all up front and then not wait for you to fuck me like 3 weeks later with a $50 DLC.
Well, I don't mind DLC as much. I have because I don't buy the DLC very much. So, and at majority, there is a few games I'll buy DLC for, but majority of the time I don't buy the DLC because I'm in it for the main story. And the DLC almost always is some weird side story that has nothing to do with the main story. And so I just don't buy it. And so it doesn't bother me that they do that. I know a lot of people really have a problem with that. There's been a few games that I will say they do stuff like that with. And I could see where people are coming from. But the majority of the time, I'm like, the DLC is not worth buying regardless. Because most of the time, it's just pointless.
If you remember back in the day, I mean, cartridges on Super Nintendo were sometimes, some games were $100, $110, $120. Yeah. So, you know, if just go ahead and put that price tag on the game and just go, you know, have people pay it up front. Like, it's really, but you're right. Like, some of the DLC isn't worth it. Like, if it's certain side missions, things like that, or added villains, like, say, the Arkham games or something like that, or the Spider-Man PS4 game, like, that's different. But when you want to do something like Battlefront, the Star Wars Battlefront, like, yeah, no, fuck EA.
Well, I will say the one thing I hate about DLCs more than anything is from a collecting point of view. And that's because it doesn't come on the disc. So, like, one day the DLC is going to disappear forever. Like, because there's always an end of life cycle on every system. It's getting a little bit better with things like way Microsoft is handling things and carrying everything over. But there's no guarantee that's going to continue. So at some point, a lot of these games are going to disappear. And if you have the original console and you want to play the entire game, you're probably not going to be able to play the DLC because it's just gone. Unless they made an ultimate edition or something that you could get later that actually came on the disc. But not all games do that. A lot of games, just like the DLC, is only downloaded. And now we're getting to the point now where some games, they're not even really on the disc. Like, you'll buy the game and the disc will just have basically a placeholder on it, and you're downloading pretty much the whole game onto the console. So, like, years from now, collecting wise, that game is not going to be played on that disc when they cut those servers off. So, collecting wise, it's kind of a pain in the ass. And which I see my collection, I mean, I'm sticking with the older stuff anyways, but like as far as like going forward in my collection, I don't think there will be a collecting this and, you know, and well, the generation coming up is still going to have physical, but the generation after that, I don't think there'll be physical ever again. I think collecting for video game wise will be gone by then.
It reminds me of something Kevin Smith said with digital comic books and stuff like that, where he said, you know, you could buy, Hulk 117 or whatever, but do you really own a Hulk 117? I think that was the first appearance of Wolverine, if I'm not mistaken, but. Yeah, like you could buy that in a digital format, but do you really own that comic, you know?
Yeah, so. Well, I don't mind, but I mean, that raises another question. I mean, like comics, like they go all digital too. What's going to happen when those servers finally get cut off one day? You've lost all of that. I mean, it's not the same as having something physical, and it just like, it kind of kills the collecting. I mean, you're not going, because everything is, we're pretty much looking at a society where everything's going to go digital. And
I used to collect movies and
like, I mean, that's definitely dead.
I had hundreds of DVDs and Blu-rays, and now it's like I haven't bought any hard media in years. Like, it's all streamable now, man.
Well, let's move on to our next one, our downfall that we've got on our list here, and that's displaying your collection. Now, Roland may not have as big a problem with this because you're not really displaying Magic the Gathering cards all that much.
Actually, it's pretty easy to display cards. That's the easy part. The hard part is when you're a war gamer and you've spent all these countless hours painting and honing your craft and honing your skill of painting, trying to display those. Now, there are those in the community that have, I think it's called a Deltot case made by IKEA. There's discussions on some of the wargaming forums on what is the best cabinet to purchase from IKEA to display your miniatures.
Well, that's the same way with me. Like you can see some of my collection behind me here, and displaying can become a real pain in the ass, especially, like you can see over my shoulder here, Diablo 3. That box is fucking huge. So that's not going to fit with like a regular game box. So like you'll get these cabinets that will fit most things, but then you have this random thing that just won't fit nowhere. And it just and it's not just that, it's also like, once your collection hits a certain max, then it's like, okay, I don't have enough space. Like I have games stacked in front of games, and I hate that. But I just don't have enough. I don't have enough real estate inside my house to spread them all out and show every single game. So I just
buy a
have
new house.
so I know, but I'm not that rich that I can just go around buying houses for my collection. So I mean that becomes an issue too. Like, where am I going to put it? Like and it's just, it sucks when you have to like put double stack stuff because you can't show it because you just don't have the space.
Yeah, Lego sets take up so much space too. I'm gonna flip the camera here for a second, kind of show mine off, but like all those sets there. But there's only so much shelves and all that stuff you could buy.
And once you get some of those Lego sets, I know some of them are really huge. If you have some of those Lego sets, they would take up like half your room just in one set.
Yeah. I mean, I have a set that I have the Hogwarts castle that takes up a whole table, basically.
But I don't. Display is like, I mean, it can be a real pain in the ass when you're trying to deal with it. I mean, and it's like when you collect something, you want to show it off.
Oh yeah,
you want to show it. So like when it becomes frustrating, it really like it. Sometimes I mean, I literally have been like, there's been times I'm like, fuck this, I'm just gonna sell it and get rid of it. So just like, it's just so aggravating to me. I think that was one of the reasons I like did go down to just collecting a couple items, because I was like, I just want to get down to where I want it to be manageable, just for myself. Because when you're collecting everything, it just becomes like, so there's so much stuff, and then and display becomes horrible when you're collecting everything, because now where the hell are you gonna do with it? I mean, when I was collecting comic books, I like to show them off too. I always like to have comics like, setting up, and you get so many of them, and then you just got boxes sitting in corners, and half the time I didn't even know what comic was in what box. It's like I don't even know where I got stuff anymore.
Or you do what I did in my early years. You wind up having so many long boxes, you have to use them as part of your furniture. Impromptu tables.
They do make good tables.
I'm not a fan of like all of my figures and stuff like that aren't in the boxes. I like to display mine, and mainly because I've never really thought about selling my collection, so I've always thought of it as, well, I'm opening it for my enjoyment, and displaying them. I have a few friends that will not open anything, and it probably makes it more valuable and stuff like that. But like I said, I've never really thought about selling any of my stuff, to be honest.
I've got a lot of sealed product. I have one wrestling action figure. I have one, and that was Jim Cornette's figure that he actually signed the package of. So I'm like, well, that I'm going to keep sealed. But in this door behind me here, in the top of that closet, you will find the most god-awful mess of still sealed Warhammer product from dating back probably as early as 2005.
I'm gonna throw you under the bus for a moment here, Roland.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember this or not, but when you were going to move to Louisville, you gave me like your DVD collection.
Yeah.
I remember you telling me that you were gonna give me that Jim Cornette figure.
Crap. Okay. Yes.
And I
totally forgot about that.
But you seemed kind of on the fence about it, and I wasn't gonna be like, well, hand it over now then.
Hand it over.
But I remember you mentioning that you were thinking about giving it to me, And I'm not throwing you under the bus just because I'm like, well, give it to me now. But I just was like, I knew you loved that figure and the fact that it was signed. That, you know, because I know he's like one of your favorite wrestling personalities. So it's not like I was gonna be like, oh yeah, you know, just hand it over them. But I remember you like briefly thought about giving it to.
Touche. I had actually forgotten all about that.
Well, I'll say this. I agree with you, Renee. Like in game collecting, I'm the same way. I open every single thing that I buy, and I will never have a sealed copy because if I'm going to buy a game, I'm going to play it, and and I cannot imagine like just going and buying a game and just leaving it sealed and never doing anything with it. What's the point of it? Like if it's you have to have a reason. I mean, just looking at your collection doesn't help, especially if it's something else. Like there has to be like some kind of enjoyment you get out of it personally. And I mean, if I'm going to buy a game, I'm going to play it.
No, I once had a friend tell me that whenever I buy Legos, I should buy 2 sets at once of the same thing. One for myself to open and build, and the other one to keep because it's gonna like quad.
But there are certain things that I do have that I still keep sealed. Any of the statues that I have, a lot of the times, if I get them still in the box, sometimes, you know, keeping them in the box to me is just added to the visual appeal of the item as opposed to having it out of the box. To me, there's something, I think there's something to some of the packaging because it's its own display case in some aspects.
Well, as far as that goes, I'll open stuff, but I won't throw the box away. So like I have a closet full of boxes of stuff, of collectibles that I bought. Like, I mean, like I semi collect consoles too. I have a lot of consoles.
You still have your Dreamcast?
Yeah, I have. Well, I still own, except for maybe I think the PlayStation 4 is the only console I've owned in like 25 or 30 years that I've gotten rid of. So I still have every console going back to my Atari 2600. And I have a lot of boxes for these consoles too. I don't like put them out, and I got the consoles out of the boxes, but I still have a lot of boxes. I have like just console boxes in the closet here behind me. Like just the other day, I was like messing around in there, and like about 3 boxes of console boxes fell over on top of me, and I was like, and those were just the 3 different Xbox Ones that I own.
Do you do most of your game collecting like online, or is there any stores you go to that you like a lot?
Yeah, there's a local store here that I go to called Game King, but they don't carry too much of the stuff that I collect. But they have every now and then they'll have something. But the one place that I do really like, and there's quite a few locations around. It's a place called Game Exchange, and I like to go there. They have a lot of they keep a lot of stuff, and they're reasonably priced because a lot of places really throw the prices up, and Game Exchange doesn't really do that. It's like, I would say they're pretty fair, but there's about 50 locations around the country of them.
There's a Game King here in Lexington too. I know exactly who you're talking about. They're not too bad.
They like to. They have their museum pieces. I'll say that.
Yeah, they do. They have. They're a little bit expensive, but they don't. They also don't. For what I collect personally, like my 2 collections, they don't really carry too many of those games. They're mostly into the newer games.
I'll be honest. Whenever I go to Game King, I'm there more for like the collectibles than I am for the video games.
Now the game, I don't know if you've ever been in a game exchange.
Mhm.
There's at least 2 in Lexington, I know. But I really like them. If you guys, they usually have a little bit of everything. They also, they even have like Atari 2600 games, and that's becoming like a hard system to collect for unless you collect online, because the game stores just don't carry them anymore. It's just like, unless you're like 40 years old or older, you don't even remember the Atari 2600 anymore.
I have to ask, do you have that horrible ET game?
I do have ET.
I've always heard of the landfill that's full of the cartridges for that game.
Yeah, I own 2 copies of ET, and that's like became my thing. I have to say that's one of the bad things about when you're collecting, especially for older ones like that. You get them without the box, and then I want the box because I like to just play them, and I like to have the box too. So I buy the game without the box, and I probably have maybe 300 games without Atari 2600 without the box, and then I go and rebuy them again when I can find them, including the box.
Atari had some really good artwork too.
Yeah. And then you got games that also came with controllers, because Atari was just all over the place and people would just make their own controllers for the thing. So you never knew what you were going to have back then.
Atari was actually my first system. But I'll be honest, the only games I really remember playing on there was Pac-Man and Pong. And then around 1988, my godmom got me my first NES that had the split Mario Brothers Duck Hunt with it. And it had the gun and the 2 controllers, when you didn't have to buy everything fucking separately.
Those some good times there.
Yeah.
I will say that is the one thing. I do not have my original NES anymore, because those did not last. And when you play them as much as I did back then, they didn't last long at all.
Bad design.
My original NES was like I would take it apart, and like it would just be in pieces, and I'd still be playing games on it with like pieces left. Actually, I actually think I know I'm gonna say it was kind of a piece of junk, but if it wasn't for the Atari 2600, I don't think I would have ever gotten into IT and made my career, because it's where I got started. I was like, how do I fix this damn thing so I can play my games?
Yeah, the NES was so cheaply made. Like, compared to the Japanese version of it, like the Famicom, I believe was the name of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like with the NES, when you push down the cartridges, it would could break the screws on the thing, and it was just
which we terrible. Did get the second generation NES, the top loader. It's very much like the original Famicom for the Japanese version. Mm-hmm. But we didn't get that till like 1990 is when it was originally released.
And those talking about the dog bone controller ones.
Yeah, I don't remember what the controller was like. It's a top loader. It's only a top loader they made.
It literally would you could fit the thing in your hand, in the palm of your hand.
Yeah. Now they're it's talking about from a collectability standpoint. They're very hard to find now, and they're very expensive.
And their controllers are expensive too.
Which I had one of those too. I had one of those too, but I do not have it anymore. My sister now has it.
I have to ask, did you ever own the Power Glove?
I did.
Piece of crap.
It's so bad.
It was so bad.
If you remember the Wizard movie.
Yeah. I love that movie to say.
Oh, it's corny as shit, but I like it too. But it's basically a 90-minute commercial.
It is
for Nintendo, Universal Studios, and Super Mario Brothers 3.
Yeah, but like, what wasn't a commercial back in the 80s and in the early 90s? Like, every
That's
cartoon that we watched was just a commercial for the toys. That's all it was.
I mean, yeah, you're right.
So it was just par for the course. But I still love that movie, and I remember when the first time I watched it, I was like, "Holy shit! That's how I get to the warp zone in Mario."
Which, plot hole. If they're the first people to ever play it, how did they know?
Exactly. He never played it before, and then he just straight went to the warp zone.
Showed you how to get the whistle and all that shit. It's how kids knew the secrets at that point. And but yeah, it's a corny fucking movie, but like you said, it was entertaining, and Fred Savage was just fucking huge in those days. I seen they're remaking a bunch of the Mario games coming up for, I guess it's the 35th anniversary.
Yeah.
So, looking forward to replaying some of those. But my all-time favorite Mario games are probably still the 2D scroller ones, like Mario Brothers 3 and Super Mario World were some of my favorites.
Yeah, the original the first three Mario games are my favorite Mario games. Although I do really like Sunshine for GameCube. I think that was a really good Mario game. Which 64 was good too. I'm not gonna say it wasn't. There hasn't really been a bad Mario game. They're all good. It's just personal preference on what you actually like.
The new Odyssey one was really good on the Switch.
I was gonna say, I think I've kind of grown away from Mario as I've gotten older.
I've actually have owned every Nintendo system so far.
Even the Wii U.
Even the Wii U, man.
I was gonna say the Wii U is the one Nintendo system I've never owned. I've thought about adding it to my collection, but I just don't want to.
And it's mostly been for Mario, Donkey Kong, Smash Brothers, stuff like that.
Like, somebody buy this man a Wii U.
I think I still have mine if you want it. The only games I never really got into, and this is probably gonna be some blasphemy for the Nintendo people, I never really got into the Zelda games.
Shut your hole.
Yeah, the Zelda games are great games, all of them. I don't think there's really been a bad Zelda game either.
I know, blasphemy.
Well, maybe part 2. But I still like it. I actually like part 2, even though a lot of people say don't like it.
Part 2 is not a bad game.
It's hard as hell.
It's frustratingly difficult, but it is not a bad game.
Games back then were just harder in general, man. Like, how often was there a game that you beat to completion? It wasn't as often as it is now.
I know. I don't agree with that. I actually, if I bought a game, because
it was getting beat.
It was getting beat because back then, like now, I just buy games. I mean, I have games at the wazoo. So a lot of games do not get beat that I buy now. But in the 80s, when I got a game, it was like a monumental occasion when I got that new game, and it was played to death. It got beat. I mean, I even beat Ninja Gaiden, and I don't know how the fuck I pulled that off back then, because I can't even get past the second level of that game now.
You know what the weird thing, speaking of Ninja Gaiden, that actually is weird. When I was, right before I moved to Lexington, I got into a big, I'm going to play Ninja Gaiden kick. Sober, Can't do it. Give me about 4 beers, give me a little bit of a buzz, and I'm good to go. We are going to the last levels of Ninja Gaiden if you get me lit enough. But now beating it, I can get you there. I cannot beat it.
So Roland, you become like the Forrest Gump of video games.
Yeah, I guess so, because, Ninja Gaiden, it's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get.
Well, all this kind of goes into I think we've kind of been talking about our last part of this. So our last thing is personality and dealing with our addictiveness and our hoarding and our completionist. And I think that's kind of what we've been talking about. And that I have to say, that can be a really big downfall when you're collecting. And I have to say, I kind of got away from it, and it was for my own sanity that I had to quit being so addictive when it came to collecting, because I just collected everything, like, at one point. And I was always adding new collections, and you want to complete them all, and it's just not possible. But it's just, I don't know. I actually think that most collectors are just hoarders that can be a little bit more organized about their hoards.
A little bit more picky about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like you said, I used to collect a little bit of everything, and it just, like you said, you're never done. And I'm not saying if you narrow it down to just one or two that you'll never be done, because truly you honestly never will be. But at least if you narrow it down to one or two, you're not as broke.
Well, see, I narrowed mine down to 2 specific things within my collection. I can complete mine because they don't make Atari 2600 games anymore, and they don't make original Xbox games anymore. So I can get every single game that's ever been made and complete the collections. And that was one of the things I stuck on. I was like, okay, I could say I'm collecting like Xbox One, PS4 games, but that's just going to keep continuing for a long time now. So like, I'm just not going to do that. I'm going to buy those because I'm going to buy those for personal enjoyment. But my collection is going to be something that I can complete, and that's when I narrowed it down to 2 things that I know that I can complete. I know exactly how it came out, when they came out, and what I'm looking for. And I actually have 2 spreadsheets that I keep on my phone at all times that say what I own, what I'm looking for. And when I go into any store that has them, I go through my list looking for what I don't own while I'm standing there.
Off the top of your head, how many total Atari games are there?
I believe it's 700. I think it's like 786, I believe.
And how many do you have out of that 786?
About half. I'm not sure the exact number, but it's somewhere around 400 is what I got. So I'm about halfway there on it. Now,
what about Xbox?
Now, Xbox, I have a long way to go. I think there's almost 900 Xbox games.
And how many of those would you say you have?
I only have about 100 so far, so I have a long way to go before I complete the Xbox collection.
So, like you were talking about with the personalities and really knowing yourself, that really strikes close to home for me because I have a super, super addictive personality. I've had issues in the past with addictions, and that's one of the actual reasons why I don't gamble. I won't play the lottery. I don't go to casinos for a good reason. I know my personality, which is actually one of the things that has led me to actually having problems with collecting before. I used to collect, much like Crocky, I would collect comics, collected statues, collected whatever. It didn't matter. If I thought it was cool, then that was going to be the thing I went after. And I can tell you where all the collecting bug started from was from, I think it was actually from my sister, who I watched. I loved California Raisins. If you guys remember those from the 80s, I loved them growing up. So I was hell-bent and determined that I was going to have every single little freaking California raisin that they ever made, which I had an extensive collection of California raisins when I was a kid. And that just, I don't know, something with that mindset just stuck with me. And one thing I kind of want to just talk about right now with the coronavirus, we can't say that, the C word virus.
Why can't we say it?
Don't want to trigger nobody. This pandemic we're in.
It's the Rona. Fuck those people.
Whatever.
Trigger the shit out. Fuck them.
Whatever. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and anxiety is really high. My anxiety has been through the roof a lot of the time, just because I can't go out and see my friends. I can go to work and come home. So now, by the time this actually comes out, a lot of that stuff's going to start easing up and subsiding as we start reopening everything. But one of the things on my end, like, I'll be 100% honest. Like I said, I recently got back into Magic, and I was hell-bent determined that I was going to start replacing my collection that I lost. When you get into collecting, if you have a mindset like mine, which is sometimes like a mindset like a steel trap, once I have it in my head I'm going to do something, hell-bent and determined, I will do it. And like I said, I also have that nice little bit of twinge of addiction when it comes to certain things. And mixed in with the anxiety and the endorphin rush that I got from cracking a pack of Magic cards or getting a package in the mail. Before I knew it, just recently, I looked at my credit card statement. And that was a wake-up call. Like I was like, I have done went and fucked up. I have seen my credit card statement. Unfortunately, I am fine. I don't want people to think, oh God, Roland's heading for the poorhouse. No, but it was good.
Roland's not going to be eat this week because he bought Magic cards.
Listen,
Roland's offering hand jobs for Magic cards.
Man, you got some of those boosters, man.
37 dicks.
But no, seriously,
I think you'd have to give like 12 just to get like one card. His hand jobs ain't gonna be worth that much.
Listen, man, you don't know. You don't know.
Well, no, mine was a Clerks reference. 37 dicks.
But like I was saying, though, it's one of the things, especially this time, like I know a lot of friends that have been doing a lot of online shopping almost just religiously right now. So the big thing is just keep your head about you. Logic will win the day when it comes to that. And, just use a lot of common sense and be careful when you're jumping in ahead, both feet, so to speak. Like I said, I don't think anyone should ever use a credit card to help fuel their addiction, because that's a big freaking whole mess of fucking scary when you get into interest rates and everything. So yeah, don't be like Roland. Be smart about it. Now, granted, I did pay off my credit card balance once I seen how much I was racking up, so we're good. I did pay the balance off, but it was still something that, left unchecked, you can get yourself into a real nasty mess really quick. And as soon as that collection that you love to own, that you love to piece together, if you're not careful, you're going to wind up having to sell that same damn collection you bent over backwards to piece together just to be able to get yourself ahead. That's my
I was going to ask you guys another question. Is there anything new coming out that's caught your attention that you're interested in collecting?
Well, there's not something new coming out that's caught my eye that I'm interested in collecting, but there is something that I'm interested in collecting, and well, I can show you. Old computer equipment, and it's a really bad idea, but I'm kind of starting to do it anyway.
I mean, because honestly, isn't that stuff almost, just barely hanging on as it is now?
No, like old computer equipment is like, it's all becoming like antiques now. I mean, the one behind me is 25 years old, and I am currently looking for like an Apple II, which is like 35 years old and could be up to 40 years old, depending on which model of it I get. But right now, I'm saying it's part of my video game collecting because some of my video games can't be played on stuff without having something like that. I got one right there, Star Trek for MS-DOS. That's what that system's for, because it will not play on anything except for a Windows 95 or MS-DOS system under Windows 95 that has floppy drives. And so that's what that's for.
Actually reminds me of a conversation I had with a coworker today. Had to come to the realization that not everyone knows what DOS is.
Well, that system is 25 years old, and it was the first system. Well, it was the first Windows system that had a real GUI. You had Windows 3.1 before that, but that was built on top of DOS. Right. Whereas Windows 95 is like straight up like GUI, and so like there's a lot of people that don't remember the world before Windows that's out there right now.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Roland?
Well, right now, like I said, the new thing for me is deciding that I was going to get back into Magic and start piecing together a collection again. So that's within the last 30 to 60 days. That's been a new thing for me. Coming out, Games Workshop done an announcement Saturday, about new models that they're going to be releasing this coming year. I'm really excited for some of those, but I don't think what I'm going to do with those is I'm just going to crack them open and paint them and, do that. I'm not going to just hold them up in the closet of shame back there, but I will eventually get some of those models. And what you were saying, there is one thing. I do have to make a full-on confession on one thing. It's Games Workshop did come out with a army box late last year, late last year, for an army that I played when I first started out in 2004 or 5. when I started playing Warhammer, and they never give the poor army anything. And then all of a sudden they decided this last year that, hey, we're going to redo this army. Here's a new army box. I actually do have 2 of those boxes. And one of them is still sealed. But I bought that just because that was something I waited damn near freaking 15 years for. But yeah, as far as anything brand new coming out, like right now, nothing that I can think of off the top of my head. Now that may change, tomorrow. So,
to answer my own question, NECA about maybe a year ago picked up the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles license up, and they've been doing really good, like doing releases of like the 1980 figures or doing new versions of them, doing figures for the 1990 movie, doing figures for the original 1984 comic. So like those have been really nice and has almost enticed me to get back into Ninja Turtles. Majority of the stuff though is through GameStop, so it's kind of their GameStop's online thing is terrible, so you're pretty much have to go from store to store to find anything. Hasbro has picked up the Power Rangers license.
Big Papa Hasbro.
Yeah, and like they've been releasing something called the Lightning Collection, and the detail on those figures is like really good. So that's kind of caught my attention a little bit as well. And then Hasbro just picked up the Ghostbusters license as well. So they're doing like re-releases of the cartoon from the 80s. And then they're also doing figures for the 1984 movies, and the detail on those is really amazing as well.
I did see I didn't know it was Hasbro that was putting them out, but I did see that they were going to re-release the animated series Ghostbuster figures again.
Yeah. And so like that's caught my attention too, but it's like
I want an Egon.
I don't know. You want blonde curl Egon?
Yeah, the crazy hair Egon.
Yeah. I miss Harold Ramis. He was so good. But that's another topic for another day.
Yeah.
But those are some of the ones that have caught my attention as far as like figure collecting.
There is one thing I didn't think to talk about, but if you guys notice, you probably can't see what that is back there, but that is an art print that I got from an artist who lives here in Kentucky, actually. His name's Larry Elmore. And I know you've met him before, Rocky. He used to do all the big artwork for Dungeons and Dragons and Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and AD&D Second Edition as well. He done like most of their artwork. He's from here in Kentucky, and I have noticed that I start collecting. I do collect artwork, framed artwork, or art prints like that from the artists that I like. I will track their artwork down, and then I'll go to Goodwill and find a nice looking frame for a couple bucks, and bam, next thing you know, I got a framed and matted piece of artwork for pretty cheap. But that is one thing I kind of just skip my mind that's another thing I collect from time to time. It's not something I get a whole heck of a lot of.
You don't want to go to Hobby Lobby and pay $80 for a frame?
Did I tell you what I did when I lived in Lexington?
Apparently not.
No. I don't know if you can see it. It's right back there behind me on this wall. Okay. There's a huge frame there that is from Hobby Lobby, and it was about $80.
Well, I was just throwing a price out there. But
Mostly I do like Elmore. I got actually his game, Snark Tales. I have a signed copy of it. It's one of the few games in my collection that is still sealed because he signed it, and I
cool,
didn't.
Dude.
I didn't open it, but I still. He was like really cool. I actually bought it directly off of him, and he signed it, and then he gave me a card with the digital version of it, so that I could play the game digitally, as well as buying a physical copy without having to open it.
Such a great man.
Yep.
And he's a freaking hilarious dude to sit down and talk with.
yeah, well, just remember, Roland. Jesus thanks you for those $80 at Hobby Lobby.
Jesus likes that money.
Just ask Joel Austin. He'll confirm that for you.
He will.
Oh my God.
Okay, guys. Well, I think we've finished our theme for this week. Before we go, I'd like to thank Rene and Roland as always, and we'll be back again next week. But before we go, I'd like to say, remember, we have you can contact us, leave comments on the videos, or contact us via our email at podcast@rolandrock.com, and send us anything, whatever you'd like us to talk about. That's fine. Or if you want us to just tell us how much you hate us, that's fine too. We don't care.
Yeah, if you want to tell us we are part of the corporate scum that has ruined this earth, that's fine. Or if you just want to tell us, hey, I want you guys to talk about this. Sure,
Yeah.
Why not? Send it out there.
Yeah, you never know what we'll talk about.
Exactly.
So, thanks for having me on. The official third co-host, I guess.
Yeah,
at this point.
Rene will be back pretty sure next week, and the week after that, I believe. And maybe I don't remember the actual schedule right now, but maybe the week after that as well.
Good Lord, Rene.
I know. But I appreciate you guys having me on. I really do.
Anytime.
Well, until next time, guys, we will see you later.
Take care, everybody.